Moving on very swiftly. So we're now going to go back to a trust. And I want to welcome Kevin and Naz from Mid and South Essex NHS Foundation Trust. Kevin is a strategic leader with extensive experience in public service innovation and cross-sector collaboration. And Naz is passionate about the NHS role as a force for social good and is dedicated to fostering a culture of health and well-being. She works closely with partners, stakeholders and funders to ensure the programme meets its objectives and delivers meaningful, lasting impact for the local communities. So I'll now hand over to both Kevin and Naz. Kevin and Naz.
Thank you, Guy. I think I'm going to lead off. I think we have some support to change the slides, and Naz will take over in the middle section. So just by way of an introduction to Mid South Essex Foundation Trust, here is our new 2035 Toward Excellence strategy configuration. And I know one of the questions in the Q&A was about where is this accountable to? So in our terms of reference currently, our communities, our partnerships, that the kind of whole gamut comes together, but we will likely be, we currently be reporting our veterans aware work on all our armed forces activity through our trust leadership group and exec board. This is sort of, bookended is not quite the right word. I'll talk a bit about Anchor in a minute. Clearly we have the accreditation and that's what we're going to focus on. But by way of some background, we're one of the larger trusts. This is 3 hospitals, Basildon, Broomfield in Chelmsford and Southend, clinical diagnostic centres, community hospitals. So we employ some 16,000 people. Unfortunately, we are one of the poorer performing trusts on a whole range of measures. So, you know, there's no need to hide it. We were certainly, I think, 11th on the league table that was produced last week. So, and we have been certainly in the HSJ press this morning about some of our other services. So we're sort of doing this very much about a backdrop of improvement and trying to develop and support outcomes for our armed forces communities, including veterans. So next slide, please. So our journey to our raising the bar and being accredited actually began, I think, in about October 23 with our signing of our covenant. But then very shortly afterwards, we had a letter advising us that we needed to be veteran aware accredited by a certain date. And it was really unfortunate, actually, because I've been tasked separately with having a look at health inequalities outcomes for veterans, and somehow a year before had missed this sort of an opportunity. So we were not necessarily late to it, but we absolutely got behind it as a trust. So we have our management diary, we have all of the bits in place, but we took a very much a standards-based approach. We really focused on what each standard was doing and the plan underneath it to make sure that we had that where it needed to be in fairly short order. Now, I mentioned earlier about the Anchor programme. Our Anchor programme is about 5 years old now. Essentially, it's about how we use our size and scale in terms of employment, in terms of spend, to support our most disadvantaged communities, whether that's by location, and we have distinct areas of disadvantage, or that's by circumstance. So that's the sort of top level of an Anchor programme. But the health inequalities aspect of it, we felt this was about the right fit in time to take the work forward. We had some interesting discussions early on alongside our ICB about just quite how all of this was going to work. But the real point of this is about the ability to identify and to extend the right support to the identified community and to transmit that across a large institution that involves lots and lots of people is really important. The other thing to note, and we'll go on to the next slide, I think probably is the easiest way of, no, we're going backwards there. I think that's the one. Thank you, whoever is changing behind the scenes. So we have a relatively large proportion of armed forces personnel, veterans in Mid and South Essex. As I've suggested, it's a big area, but we're actually reasonably close to Colchester Military Barracks. And I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the concept of people tending to settle where they last served. So what we see in our demographics is the 3 adjacent district councils having proportionately higher numbers of veterans than we have further away from Colchester, so towards London. Interestingly, though, we have data that would indicate that perhaps those closer to London might have a greater level of needs, because Mid-South Essex includes places like Southend and Canvey Island, where there has been, people often have retired there from London. So that the other sort of part of this was that in our core 20+5 model, health inequalities, veterans and their needs were one of what we referred to as the plus groups. So our approach has been very much about building on an existing armed forces network. So that's our internal equalities, diversity and inclusion programme that has an armed forces network, and then developing structures adjacent to that that would help us to take forward the required accreditation. And in that mix, we had our chief exec, our chief medical officer, our healthcare inequalities SRO, and sorry for all the sort of vernacular, not necessarily vernacular acronyms, and our non-exec directors who have specific responsibility as part of those arrangements. And then we have very much an operational group that meets on a monthly basis. That includes, I think we need the next slide, I suspect. Yeah, there we are. That includes, for instance, COBS, all of the component parts of a team in a big hospital that will be able to contribute to achieving those 8 standards. And that was our approach. We were fortunately successful. And then later on, after Naz has done her 3 slides, I'll come back and talk about the what next. So some of the challenges that we experienced was often about trying to upskill our staff members and spread that awareness and knowledge about identifying patients. And occasionally what we got back was, so what is the difference that's going to occur as part of that? And we've worked hard, if you like, to try to also fill up that bucket. And it is very much part of one of the particular 8 standards about integration and enabling access to other services. So Naz, can I hand over to you for some slides on some of the detail of some of the standards work, please?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kevin. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you so much. So as Kevin mentioned, we had a bit of a tight time frame to make sure our trust was accredited. And I just wanted to really focus on the identification of our veterans that are coming through to our trust. So we successfully managed to add alerts to our patient digital system on site. So we've got 2 that we use. We've got one is called Lorenzo and Medway, but I also want to highlight we have a new patient digital system coming into place hopefully next year called Nova, and all of our current alerts that we've got currently and the statuses will also be transferred over to Nova. So just really wanted to showcase how we supported our staff at the trust in identifying our armed forces communities. So we did a lot of in-house training sessions, which were delivered by myself and Kevin. We worked around our staff. I know a lot of conversations have taken place where it is really hard to get our staff to take time out with the busy schedule. So what we offered was some bite-sized sessions that we did both in person. We did these over Teams channel, just to make sure that we are pointing at the key factors that our staff need to understand and be aware of when they are asking the question to our patients. We also targeted very high footfall areas. So we covered outpatients across all 3 sites. We have done our emergency departments as well. Again, really helping us in raising the alert so that we are capturing this information. Of course, we had our comms team supporting in the background with, doing screensavers, posters, visiting wards. That's something I did last year in person. I physically went down across all 3 sites, made sure that our staff knew that we are a veteran aware accredited trust, but also helping and making that awareness of which staff need to actually be asking the question. We've also got our intranet page for staff, so they can go onto the page if they needed to have a bit more guidance or they weren't sure. We've also got our website page where we sort of showcase future upcoming events and to make sure that our trust is accredited. Next slide, please. So service champion training. So I am really proud to say I am one of our service champions at the trust. Really want to actually showcase and highlight that we have successfully delivered 25 sessions. Again, these include in person, doing them virtually on Teams, targeting our IDT team, A&E, medical secretaries, outpatients. Roughly around 500 staff at our trust have been upskilled. And I think this is quite fantastic, the amount of staff that we have actually managed to upskill and train. It just goes to show like how many staff will be able to hopefully support our veterans and the armed forces community throughout the whole trust. We have successfully managed to recruit 22 service champions. Not all of them are directly from our trust. I have been successful in also onboarding from our communities as well, showcasing all of the benefits of actually being a armed forces champion. And got a quote put up from Jen, actually, from one of our, she's our medical secretary at the trust. And it just goes to show the commitment and the momentum that we've kept going. I know we've secured 22 service champions, but it just really goes to show, again, the motivation that the trust is committed to. And again, all linking to our patient benefits. The more service champions we have on board from different departments across the site, they'll be able to support our veterans and members of the armed forces community. Next slide, please. And again, making a lot of comms and awareness. So we have got our comms team that are supporting us. I've mentioned previously, we've got our intranet page as well as our website page, but I really wanted to showcase the organisation raises awareness of our veterans and armed forces community. So we've obviously celebrated 80th anniversary of D-Day. We've done Armed Forces Week on site, Remembrance Day. We have actually been really fortunate that we do get our exec team involved right from the beginning. And we are fortunate enough that we have links to 254 Medical Regiment and Royal British Legion that actually come physically on site and support us with these events. And again, it's just really strengthening our connections between the NHS and the Armed Forces community by showcasing all of this. We do tend to update both our intranet page and our website pages with all upcoming events that are linked to the armed forces community. So I would like to say we are really good at our comms and always, sort of keeping on top of that. But yeah, this is some of the highlights that I really, really wanted to showcase. So I'll hand over back to you, Kevin.
Okay, thank you, Naz. I'm just going to dwell, actually, for those that can still see this slide. There's a little bit of history here in that where we have the lantern from, I think, last year's celebrations, that actually was an RAF base at one time, or an airfield at minimum. And I think at least in one of our wars, it was used as care for servicemen. So there's kind of an attachment there that goes perhaps a little bit deeper. Behind that red lantern is a memorial to the people that flew from that airfield in support of our efforts across 2 world wars. So just thought I'd share that with you. We all have reasons why we come to the veteran space, and I thought that just may be of interest to people. Next slide then, please. Thanks. So this is the slide about, I think it's standard 7. I can't ever remember exactly which standard it is, but this is about our ability as an employer, and a large employer. In fact, we are the largest in the east of England, to provide support to our veterans and our armed forces. Now, we're delighted that very recently we've been able to upgrade that to the Gold Award. And it's really interesting. We can have that as our undercard on all of our comms and everything. Actually, the detail below it, perhaps, also identifies the journey that the trust needs to go on now. We don't have a lot of vacancies at the moment, and that will be very similar across many parts of the health system. But actually, I can assure you can see there, we are receiving numbers of applications. Perhaps the piece that we have to work on is converting some of those who were not successful into interviewed and offered. And of course, some of them can already be people who are working for us, identifying as veterans. So just sort of putting that into the mix in terms of some of the directions we have within the long-term plan and employment for NHS trusts, and how we support people who are economically inactive or otherwise disadvantaged into work in health. Next slide, please. So a couple of slides here, and I will probably beginning to get a little bit short of time. So one of the things that we were most keen on in some respects, that this was both a top-down, bottom-up type of approach. So we were very delighted to be part of the Veterans Voice, the Eastern Region Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust. And actually we went with something really quite community orientated in terms of using our hospitals, but actually beyond that in terms of our community, in terms of trying to ensure that people are aware of the care that we can offer to our veterans and our armed forces. And it mainly tends to be veterans, but not exclusively. That's much more about the demographic. We, apart from the aforesaid Colchester military base, there isn't a great deal else for existing service right now actually on patch. But that we are kind of just getting into the third quarter on, and seems to be well received. The most important thing, and Naz talked about it earlier on, is we made a plan that will involve recruiting service champions, not just from the NHS, but from all sectors, from all walks of life. And that is almost about a legacy and a footprint model about spreading that awareness of the needs and our ability to support them. So I think the final one, except for a few comments to close up, next slide. So one of our sort of set pieces, and this is very much part of the accreditation model, is that we have some capacity across our 3 sites to be able to absolutely focus on people who are attending to our hospitals on their support needs. Tendency towards the physical and sensory, because we're an acute trust and there is some existing provision around poor mental health, but we are working with Defence Welfare Medical Service, and I'll unpack some of that because Defence Welfare Medical Service are themselves part of that accreditation, or the recommended niche, highly specialist third-party provision. What we really want to be doing, well, we actually went through a phase where we tested a few cases earlier on, and I suppose it's a bit like the clinical equivalent of looking at an X-ray and not quite liking what we were seeing. And so actually that was our next move, was to think, okay, how can we change this? How can we improve this at quite short notice to ensure that we do get the right support and the right outcomes for our armed forces community, including our veterans. And so we've gone to an arrangement with Defence Welfare Medical Service that we expect to see beginning in the next 6 weeks. We will be looking at that carefully in terms of both outcomes and in terms of its costs. So it looks a bit like some of the earlier work that NHS supported and sponsored. I think there were 14 to 17 trusts that received investment, some of which went to this model. But actually, this is also about, and I kind of hate to use the phrase, it's all about money. It isn't, it's about outcomes, but we have to deliver that efficiently and effectively. So trying to calculate the benefits in those difficult questions about trade-offs and what we should and what we shouldn't be doing. So we are working alongside Anglia Ruskin University, their Veterans and Families Institute, with DMWS and ourselves to make that happen. Final slide. So we're really positive at Mid-South Essex about the distance we've travelled, but also what we can achieve and what we could do more of, if you like. So we continue to work hard at identifying veterans and our armed forces community. That is never going to be a finished product, I suspect. It requires ongoing stimulation, nudging, nurturing, and in some cases straight out ask, why aren't we doing this? Yeah. So we have this ambition about kind of filling up all of the nooks and crannies that you have in a big hospital to make sure that people can either do it through the paperwork, can do it electronically, or can at least ask the question and provide some form of signpost towards. So we're looking forward to VCHA's new video. We think that's going to be great for ward rounds, for team meets. So we're really, really looking forward to that one. The other part of the story and going to Defence Welfare Medical Service, and when we sort of looked at what we'd got and some of the challenges that we felt we were being faced with, it is that ability to unlock the fuller resource that's available through or to the NHS for our veterans, so those third-party military charities, and that we hope Defence Welfare Medical Service will also be able to be alongside us to make sure that happens. So it's about the right and fullest use of resources in support of this particular group or cohort of our patients. I think I've covered the territory I needed to there, Guy, if that's okay.
No, Kevin
And managed to
Naz.
get us absolutely on time. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, I thought you were about a minute over actually, Kevin, but I won't hold you to that. It's not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you very much, Kevin and Naz, for some of the fantastic work you're doing down there. So well done both. Long may it continue.